house in Mount Eden for the grand sum of 65,000. So, yeah.
I hope that comes up on the episode. Welcome to Slice, Property Made Possible. We're a platform on a mission to reduce barriers to home ownership. This podcast is a safe space for our community to learn together and build the confidence required to start on their property journey. When you're ready to start, head along to slicetobuy.com and sign up for your free dashboard. International Women's Day event this evening. We're so stoked to have you all here, and of course we've got some amazing guests. We've got Marisa Fong, who is a co-founder of Madison Recruitment, a property investor and all-round amazing woman. And we're also joined by Carmen Vicelich, who founded Data Insights and Velocity and has some amazing experience in the property space, alongside myself, founder of Slice, also in the property space. And we're so stoked to have this opportunity to come together as a community and learn more and talk more about our financial wealth journeys and hopefully help you guys with yours. So thanks for joining us, guys. Oh, bless. This is going to be too easy. Shall we start things off by talking a little bit about ourselves? Like if you guys could give a better intro than what I just did. Do your best.
Oh, thanks, Carmen. Cheers for that. I describe myself as I'm in a stage of my life where I call myself having a portfolio life, which means I do lots of things, and there's probably too many things. My background was recruitment. It definitely was my step into my business career. My business career then stepped me into credible wealth management and portfolio of my life. So it's enabled me to do some really cool things now, with a big exit in 2013, earn out in 2014. So that really enabled me to realise some of my other passions. But yeah, it was my business that helped me, and property played a part in that. So I'll talk a bit more about that later.
Awesome. And Carmen?
So my background is didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, and when I married my husband, he was making more money than me. He was in advertising, and he said when we got married he wanted to go and study IT, and I was going to have to go on a budget. And I'm not good. I've never done a budget and I've never done a diet. Both of those things didn't sound like me. And I said, well, I'll just go and earn more money. And so I started working in data and tech, and I worked for someone else for 10 years and had 4 babies along the way, and then left and saw no one was really doing what I wanted to be doing. So started my entrepreneurial journey just over 10 years ago, and started my first company which was Data Insight, to then fund my second company, which is Velocity, which is today live across 2,500 cities around the world, connecting banks and valuers in New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, India and UAE. And then I've just recently started a third company, Generate Zero, which digitises and enables companies to measure their carbon emissions, because I'm really driven by impact and using technology and data to create impact.
To lean into the property side of things, because obviously that's what we do at Slice. We're trying to reduce barriers to ownership through our tech platform. How do you find property to be an influence in your wealth journey?
So when I first got into property, it really was because of my boyfriend, who is now my husband, and he was a great saver. I was not. I was a great spender, but I was a really good earner. I knew how to make money, but I also knew how to spend it. He was really good. He was an entrepreneur, did dance parties and was a promoter, and he knew how to save money. So luckily for me, he had a deposit, and he bought our first house in Mount Eden for the grand sum of 65,000. So, yeah.
I hope that comes up on the episode.
So that's kind of, embarrassing for everyone. And that whole thing about we were lucky. But I do remember, though, that the deposit had to be at least, I think it was like 25 or 30%. I remember salaries and things were very small back then, and interest rates were 20%. So it might sound like it was a really cheap deal, but I remember being really terrified that I had to sign these documents because I was getting co-ownership of my boyfriend's property, and it was a 30-year mortgage. And I remember thinking, when you're that young, you're kind of like, oh my God, 30 years, I'm going to have this mill around my neck, this mortgage. So it was quite freaky. But that actually was the leverage that helped me ultimately later start a business. And the funny thing about the deposit was that he had all the deposit, but I was so proud and independent. I said, I will pay all the mortgage repayments to match your deposit because I don't want to be beholden to you, right? And I was so independent, and he was like, okay. He was okay with that. The funny thing is, like Carmen, I outstripped his earnings and I actually way more than paid back the deposit. In fact, I think I paid the whole mortgage myself later. No, that's not true. He continued with his career.
He's not here, Marisa. It's okay.
No, it's true. He might hear this. Anyway, so that was kind of interesting as well, that my earning potential changed during that time that we had that house, which was 10 years. So that's a really interesting observation as well, about where you are in your stage of life and your potential earning as well.
Yeah, what about you, Carmen?
I think I'd build on that actually. It really depends what's important to you and where you are in your stage of life. And I think, often people look at older people, I would call us, and go, oh, you've got such amazing whatever you've got. But actually, we didn't start like that. And it's actually thinking, well, it's always a pathway. And I think that's important to not set unrealistic expectations and just to get in the market. And our first place was also, I think, about 165,000. It was a small terrace house, though, 70 square metres. And we weren't even really looking. And my parents saw a billboard that said, put down $2,500, and then you've got to save for the deposit, and then and it was quite a long build. And so he literally rang us and said, why don't you do that? And we were like, well, where are we going to find the next, thing? And I guess it forced us, so we're probably more risky in that we kind of committed and then made it happen as opposed to a more strategic plan. And then really, but it was interesting, as our desires and pathways shifted, we went from that property to a bigger property because we had children. I have 4 children. And from there, we just did up our property. And then my husband decided it would be a good idea. He was more the entrepreneurial one, and I was working a very good corporate job and, having babies and working from home with the children because I'm in data and tech and I didn't want to stop. And he decided to buy this event property that also had a house on it in West Auckland. And I thought he meant, retire in West Auckland, not we're looking at a place to buy. And the property on that beautiful estate was rented out, and we couldn't even look at it because someone was in it. And so we bought it unseen because we were buying this business. I was still paying for everything, doing my day job. And I remember us going in there, and it was disaster. It was an old villa that had been plonked in. The floor was on an incline and it was all damp. And we'd just done up our last house, which we bought was teal, and we painted it and sold it. And now I remember my mother-in-law helping us, who was less risk averse than us. And she was just going, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. And I was like, okay, just be quiet, please. It's all going to look lovely. We're just going to paint it all white and cream and everything will be fine. And so we didn't actually move along because it was more of a pathway. And then from there, we wanted to have another child from 2 to 4 and moved out. I guess the one thing from that journey that was a big shift was we were renting and we were about to build our new home when I resigned from 10 years to start our business. And had said, my husband, you always were entrepreneurial. Now, no one was doing what I wanted to be doing in data and tech. So it was a massive risk at the time that we took. And the company that I'd worked for actually fought me in court to stop me from starting, which no one expected. And so I'm the income earner with 4 children. He's the wonderful house dad. And I've quit my job to start this amazing company. And then I can't actually start and I can't actually make money. And we're renting and we've sold our house, but all that money is for the new house and we have 4 children. And no one expected, and long story short, it was about a year, I got a public apology and a 6-figure payout, but no one predicted that. But I had to spend a lot of our house money to actually fight for the right just to start my business. So I guess it's a really interesting property journey that's very much aligned with our business journey because we took a lot of risks. So don't let that be your top tip. But it's really that it's not a straight line. And probably if you sit and think, oh, it's all right for them, they're so successful and they've done all these things, we've actually put ourselves out there. And I'm sure I know you well enough to know you would have done that to say, actually, we're going to stretch ourselves for this goal. And whether it's property or whatever it's what that you're wanting to do, you just have to sometimes really put yourself out there and really go after what you want.
I think that is a tip, though, saying don't take this away. But I think it is, though, because I think that's probably a common theme between all three of us as well, like that you don't take risks, you don't win. So you do have to take some risks, but it has to be within your appetite and circumstances. I mean, I bought sight unseen my first home as well in Raglan, and I was looking in Auckland at first, couldn't afford it, was trying to buy by myself. My mum ended up going guarantee. I love talking about how my parents helped me on the ladder because there's nothing wrong with getting help or finding the opportunities that are available to you. So never feel shame, never feel embarrassed about the opportunities that you're leveraging. Just find those opportunities that work for you and go with them. A boyfriend
that knows how to save.
Yes, find a boyfriend, guys. Happy International Women's Day, find a rich man.
And get your name on the ownership papers. Yeah, that one. Yeah.
No, but
please get a de facto agreement just in case.
Yes, which we actually sell at Slice, so you're welcome. You we sell contracting out agreements on our website at slicedby.com. Thanks for coming, guys. You can head off. No, absolutely. I have one with my partner as well. So the second property that I bought with my partner after knowing him for 3 months. So that's another big risk. So, I mean, there's definitely a common theme between...
I made mine give me a ring first.
Oh, there you go.
Well, I did want to, as you were talking, I did think something about what came to us as we got further along in our property journey was how much we played it quite safe for our second, we sold the first one, which was, so much more money than we'd paid for it. So it could have capital gain, all that's, we know that property cycle. And then we then bought an apartment, I think. And again, it was Key West and it was the first apartment block and blah, blah, blah. But what was really interesting is that we never overextended ourselves. We didn't really push ourselves to feel really scared. And in hindsight, and actually along the way, what we started to understand was that we had more leverage than we thought, and we didn't need to be so conservative in the risks we took. We did take risks by doing something different with the apartment and all that kind of stuff, but we didn't buy the 2-bedroom, for instance. We bought the 1-bedroom, and in hindsight, we would have done better to have just extended ourselves a little more. And I say this because in your prime earning years, like now, for most of you, I think, unless something terrible happens, like redundancies, and I know it's a bit scary out there at the moment, typically in your prime earning years, you are going to go on an upward trajectory. Your salaries hopefully don't go backwards, right? So because you get better at what you do, you get more experience, maybe you go and get or whatever. And so where you are now here, and then when you buy your property, you think you're going to be there for a long time, but you're not. Your actually income earning potential goes up, and therefore, your repayment ability, is increased, right? So it just kind of makes sense to just think, where will I be in 4 years' time, or 2 years' time, or 3 years' time? And, hopefully you're not going to be static. Hopefully your income level, and as I say, you're in your prime career years, so your income level should be going up. Track your mortgage payments, and if they're kind of, you've got a reasonably static kind of mortgage interest fixed thing and that kind of stuff, maybe you can extend yourself a little more. It's scary now with these interest rates doubling and people coming off their 2% or 4% now going to 7 or whatever it is. I get that journey, but I just sometimes wonder with I looked back and thought, we were really conservative to start with, and maybe just mapping out a little more about taking a little bit more extension and not being too safe. Especially women, we're very conservative, and I think that maybe we can risk a little more.
Yeah,
Not everything, but a little more. Yeah.
And I mean, the bank does that. Like, that's why the bank will lend mortgages for X to you when you're 20 and they won't lend to you when you're 65. That's because of what Marissa's just said.
Look at the two things here. So they're always going to look at your credit score and your ability to service that, and certainly the regulation and the requirements around that. Responsible lending needs to make sure that you can. But then they also look at the asset, which is obviously my sweet spot, to say, well, actually, should we say yes to this property or should we say no? Because if something happens to the person you can't repay, will they get their money back? And that feeds into all sorts of things that every bank looks at, from the valuation, from the risk, and, of late, things like climate change. And there's, different things that will impact that ability for that property. But generally, in New Zealand, if you hold on to property over time, it goes up. And I remember with COVID, we were all in lockdown and every bank was thinking, well, what does this mean for my lending policy? And we ran analytics and automated valuation models that said, if everyone had to sell tomorrow across the whole of New Zealand, based on the current value, because we use AI and data models to come up with this for banks, there was only 3,000 and something properties in New Zealand at the time when we went into first lockdown that if they had to sell tomorrow would sell for less than what the people had bought them for, because the property market was going up. And it was such a phenomenal number for the whole of New Zealand to put it in context and go, everybody calm down. It's a pandemic. The property market is totally fine. And I remember going on a news thing with one of the banking economists, and she was like, it's going to drop 15%. And I was like, based on what? There's no data.
And then everyone started buying because they weren't spending on travel. So
well, exactly. Like, no. I think you make a good point, though, that, yes, stretch yourself, but also feeding into that you're all very young. And I think it's International Women's Day, so I'm going to say it that actually I have 3 companies. And I am meaning you, Ernest, at the back. You're all young and glamorous. None of us, we're all young. We're young. And, actually put yourselves out there and ask for more. Because if you were thinking, well, is my income going to go up? That is also up to you. And, so many people, when I'm doing the reviews we were talking before, the guys in my team go, I'm amazing, I should have this much more. And, where am I going? What's my next promotion? And so many of the ladies in my team, so not everybody, I'm generalizing, they will be like, well, how am I going? Am I doing okay? And they don't actually ask for more money. So, there is a top tip that says, don't ask, don't get. So, ask.
Take the risk and ask.
Well, they can say no and say, well, I'm doing all this awesome work. If you deserve it, either they're looking after you and they're going to say, well, actually, yeah, I'm, because I'm sure if you're working hard and you're going the extra mile, or if they're not valuing you, then there's always options. So make sure that you do actually think, well, actually, am I where I want to be? And, am I asking for what I want?
Yeah, and that's sort of what Marissa was saying before around, actually, you said high earner. You weren't necessarily, you can be a spender, but there's only so much you can do by budgeting your way to success. Like, you actually have to take some risks. You have to ask for more. You have to build your income, and property is a good way to do that. Yeah. One really interesting example, which you guys won't know, is I was not getting a raise at one of the banks we were talking about prior to this. I went from one role and I was working my guts off like in the evenings, and actually it was in a role where there was a lot of IP and personal IP that was going into it, and I didn't have equity in that, and I wasn't getting valued for that, wasn't getting rewarded for that. There were a lot of men in that and working literally on identical projects on double the salary that I was on. Anyway, long story short, I moved from that bank to another bank. So I do believe in the jungle gym, and you should just like move across. Yeah, long story short, I doubled my salary. So I went from, I think it was maybe 120, almost doubled, to about 220, 230 overnight just by changing banks. So that's actually, I asked for it also, by the way. And how outrageous, how did I actually get like to that point where I felt confident enough to say that? I was sure of my value, but I also actually spoke to people and did the market research, which you would love, Carmen, to identify actually, hey, what is this role worth? So actually just go for those bigger roles, move across, move out. If you're not getting a raise or a promotion, or you're not learning and growing in the way that you should be out.
But you can actually stay in the same company, and if they might nurture you. So of all of the people
can't.
still
No, I'm
working for me for many, many years that I've grown, some of them have been with me for 10 years. If you're working with the right leader, they want to grow you.
Yep.
So ask the current boss for the double, they probably would have gone for the hills.
Yeah.
But, actually,
It depends.
Yeah, because it depends again what you want. Because sometimes people, certainly corporates, can pay more money, but then you probably have to be in the office for certain days, and there's politics and all of those things. But if that's what if you don't mind, then go and climb the corporate ladder. So I think it comes back to really knowing what you want and where you want to go and what's important to you, because I think that's the most important thing. Because if you think about the powers of the universe, and you think about somebody and they'll suddenly phone you, or you're looking at buying a particular car and you see it everywhere, and the laws of attraction work. But how can the laws of attraction work if you're on this boat and you don't even know what island you're going to? You're going to go with the tide, you're going to go with the wind, and now your friend's doing this, so now you're over here, and then your boyfriend's doing that, so now you're over here, and that's okay if that's what you want, and as long as you're happy and the sun's shining and waking up every day. But if you are driven and you're sitting here at whatever time, 6:30 at night on a Friday night, I was like, God, who's going to come at this time on a Friday night? And does anyone on my team want to do this? When I saw this in my diary this morning, but so good on you. You're obviously here because you really do want to actually be somewhere. So the most important thing is decide where you want to be and what's important to you. It's not necessarily just financial, but good on you for a double.
I know, that's just a great story, isn't it?
It is.
So why not
all
share
the
it?
good stories.
Yeah.
How I'm giving you.
Yeah, you're just setting me up.
I am.
No, and I totally agree. It is circumstantial, but I think that is where you are. I was frustrated. I was not, the circumstances were not in my favour. I wasn't being valued, and obviously I wasn't, because then I moved across and I did get it. So clearly I was being underpaid.
Some
if you can make that move, and it is corporate, so it depends.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to start up and I earn 70k. So, it is value-based.
Yes, it is. I think also there is something, I don't know how many of you know the thing around pie. Who's heard of pie?
I've got a couple of nods in the back.
Yeah. So you know about pie, right? So so it's all very well to say, I know what I want, I know where I'm going to go, but you do need people to see that. And so pie stands for performance, image, exposure. You look it up if you can Google it. Okay, so how much of performance do you think counts towards salary, promotion, being recognised, bonuses, commissions, awards? How much do you think performance?
20% do we have? 15?
10.
10.
So performance is table stakes, right? Just turning up and doing your job really well is just table stakes, okay? So how much do you think image counts for being seen?
What is
recognised,
image?
promoted?
Is it just being seen, or
No, your how
dress
you look,
sense?
how you appear, how you communicate.
Well, you guys look lovely, so I'm guessing it's more.
So I'll tell you, it's 30%, right? So this is why men advance so much more quickly than women, because guess what? Exposure is 60% of how you'll get ahead. Okay, so what does exposure mean? Exposure means, and this is the story I'd tell, for instance, right? You're a young law grad, you've just gone into a law firm, you're interning, you're your first year, whatever, you're a male. Firstly, you probably negotiated a 10 grand starter increase than your female colleague because she didn't ask, right? So you're already 10 grand ahead, okay? And then the partners are going to the bar to watch the rugby. Who did they invite? They invite the female grads and interns? No.
If she was good looking.
Maybe. But even
Good question.
yeah, and then so
Aye.
they invite the guys, all the guys tag along to the thing and watch the game, and then the partners get to know those young, and so then, oh, John's a good bloke, isn't he? Blah 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 blah. And so this is just an analogy. I'm just sharing. It's not a true story, but I'm just saying this is a very basic level thing, right? That we already start behind. And so my thing is actually, if you want to be noticed, and you got to make yourself noticed. You got to get in front of the people that have the power to make those decisions that matter for you, right? Because you could ask for all the pay rises in the world. If no one knows you or cares, it doesn't matter. But if they know the value of your work and you've made sure you've been explicit about it, okay? And what I mean by that is if you're in a meeting and, never pick up the pen, okay, girls, women, never pick up the pen to take notes, never make the coffee or tea, never be the nice person in the room because you don't see the boys doing that, right? Okay, so then the second thing is you've got to be explicit about what you've achieved, what you're doing, what project you're working on, what KPIs you're meeting. You've got to be explicit about your contribution, not we, I. Okay? I have contributed this much. I was here last night till 8 o'clock. This is what I've done, Mr. Partner. And you've got to make sure they see you doing it. Okay? And you've got to be explicit about your contribution and what they would lose if you were not there anymore. So I'm just saying that there's no point us, doing a really good job because it only counts for 10%, looking really like we fit because that's only 30%. We've got to be making sure we are seen and heard by the right people. Exposure. And one of the ways to do that is to find the person that you think could help you and ask them to be your mentor in that company. Even if they say no, ask who they could recommend because at least they know who you are and they go, oh, this person wants me to mentor them. Who are you? What do you do? Why? Just be seen, right? Get to be known. Build yourself a profile. And if that doesn't work, leave and get double at the next company.
That doesn't obviously happen all the time. It's just a really good example of me asking. I think what's interesting about that is it leans into that exposure piece, which, yes, like in some environments, in some corporates, you do need to play that game. But then it's just acknowledging that. So maybe the takeaway today is not actually I need to find exposure in my current role. Maybe it is. Maybe if that's the company that meets those values and you see room for them to support your growth and to support you as a person, then yes, you look to, play within that role of exposure. But otherwise, maybe, there's another version. Maybe Carmen's hiring, and maybe exposure looks different in different places. And different people definitely will accept that because I do that too. Like Hannah and I work together. I hardly ever see Hannah because I'm really on my laptop working from home and we just have such high trust and she's so competent, it's not an issue. So I think exposure can be different from place to place. We've got a question which is a bit rogue because we're saving them until the end, but I'm going to allow it because it shows confidence and we have been saying...
She's just embarrassed her now.
We have been saying ask for a raise. Is that what you're asking for?
I'm so sorry.
No, go for it. Yeah, we were talking about this just before. Who would like to dive in?
I think humility is one of my strengths. If you ever do a character strengths thing, humility is really high on my character strength. So it's not that it's bad to have humility, but I think there is also this drive around or need for us to be really clear about our value. And when I talk about being explicit, I don't mean I believe in it's the how, right? I believe in how do I ask for more nicely. I mean, I'm not talking about being a nice girl, but doing it in a way that people feel comfortable hearing it. And people are different. Like you'll get bosses or groups of vibes in a room different, companies, corporate cultures different. So work with the culture. What is the culture? What are our values in this company? And how will I get heard? And work within that because whatever works for the person that seems to be getting ahead, if you look at that and say, who's ahead of me that I admire as a role model, how are they behaving? What is the languaging here? Because every organisation, every company has its own language. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a vibe and a languaging and an acceptance. So some people are like, you'll go into a very sales-led organisation and it's very kind of, between the eyes. It's straight, it's like aggressive, it's fast, whatever. But if that's really different. And they in a type of environment, Carmen, sales background, it'll be about, numbers and where I'm ranking and, how's my pipeline? And it's all very sales-driven languaging, right? And even the accounting people or the clerical staff will all know about targets and stuff. So just work out, what is the language of my organisation? How do I get across my contribution in a way that they understand, that is not braggy but is specific and is credible to me? I don't think there's anything wrong with bringing that to attention, because I don't know if you've seen in a room, who's had that experience where you come up with an idea, it's not heard, and then 5 minutes later a man will say it, right?
Or woman.
Or an older, more senior person, or whatever it is, right? And then suddenly it's heard. And you're like, I just said that 5 minutes ago, And so my question is, how is it that we don't get heard? And sometimes it's, go.
I just wanted to comment, my favourite thing to say when that happens, thank you for reiterating my point that it was missed.
Yeah.
For you.
Just so that
Awesome.
we can put that on the episode. I'll just repeat it. So it was, thank you for reiterating my point. Yeah.
I think
bold.
That's awesome. I think you can be humble, but when you think that you're not being humble, the question is kind of who's judging you. That you're too ambitious, and it's just like if a drunk person calls you ugly, does that mean you are? So who are you listening to, and who are you actually associating with that thinks that you're not actually as good as you feel that you are? And I think as a parent, this is something that I tell my kids, and it's so funny because I go around. I when they were younger, I'd go and say goodnight to each of them. And I'd say, start with my youngest, go to the oldest. And the youngest is a girl. I go, darling, you're so amazing. You're so clever. You're so beautiful. You're so kind with the animals. And she's like, oh, thank you, Mummy. Thank you. And then I go to my son and, I'm like, oh, you're so clever. You're so good at sport. And he's like, I know. And it's not saying that he's particularly vain. There's a natural confidence. It's obviously just something that's totally genetic in all of us, that some of you have brothers and you'll know, like, they're just so much more confident. I would say, without being, it can be a science. So, we've had people saying, well, I want to have more money. And sometimes, my data insight company, for example, we're like, well, you're not there yet. And so this is what a, intermediate analyst gets, and this is what a senior analyst gets, and this is what a leader gets. So, these are the brackets, and these are the behaviours and the things to get you there. So let us take you there. So, if you're in the right organisation, whoever's managing you or leading you, it can be quite a science to say, well, actually, what does success look like? Because I'm here to grow, I'm ambitious, and, what does that look like? Can you tell me, what are the success metrics? Because then you can actually also say, well, I've delivered those things, so this is what I deserve. And they're telling you because, don't be shy to ask, well, what are my colleagues getting that are ahead of me? Because I want to grow there, and I'm happy to do whatever I have to do. So, it should be a mutual conversation, not a one-way going, I think I'm awesome, and might not, not everybody is as awesome as they think there are. And sometimes, as long as your manager's responding to say, this is the pathway to get there, this is what you need to do, and we'll review it in 3 months, and we do this. And we've seen people grow. And, they show their worth. We've seen interns come and start working for us on a very low salary. And in a year, they are doing more than some people that have been, in the workforce for many, many years. And we recognise, well, the paradigm's changed. Well, those people, we're not going to just give them that small 3% raise. What they're doing is they've, in 1 year, have grown to that. So that's what we pay them. Otherwise, we will lose them, like your example. So make sure you're in the right place because you don't owe them a living. And, ask the challenging questions. Great question.
Yeah, mine's a little, my response is maybe a bit controversial, but it speaks to where I'm at this point in time. And I'm a bit bored of being humble.
Entrepreneurial.
I'm a bit bored of it. I was pretty cocky and arrogant when I was maybe early 20s. So I acknowledge that. And I think, I've learnt from that. I've got 2 older brothers, so maybe that's an element of it. I had to fight to just be heard in any conversation. So I started out, at age 5 doing that. But yeah, there was a period of time where I was pretty arrogant, and then I pulled back from that. I matured. They call it the Dunning-Kruger theory. When you, that's what I've been on. So when you think you know everything and you're really ambitious, things are happening. That's probably when I asked for that raise, and then not quite, but then you sort of hit a curve and you're out the other side, and you sort of have this realization that actually you don't know everything, there's much more to know. And I think my early 20s, I really experienced that, but I loved being like so confident. Like I would love to have that confidence back. And now it really ebbs and flows for me. And I think humility and confidence are massively interrelated. And for me, if I'm spend too much of my time now worrying about being humble, worrying about, well, I'm not good at this, by the way. This is just my current state today of me trying to get cockier again, because I'm moving into sales and I'm trying to like actually feel okay asking for money and managing the mindset and the energy around I'm giving value, I get money in my own business. And it's been a real shift for me. So now I'm actually trying to, get rid of some of those humility kind of characteristics and actually start increasing the self-confidence, the self-talk. And if I'm too busy being humble and underplaying myself, undervaluing myself in conversation here, in conversation in my head, in any kind of way, shape or form, then that's how I'm going to show up, and I'm going to start believing that. So right now, all due respect, I don't want to be humble. I want to be confident again. I want to like be okay sharing my talents, my expertise, my value with the world, and not feel like I need to quieten my sound or dim my light for the benefit of other people. So I think as a generalization for women, there's a lot of opportunity for us to lean into that and go, actually, it's okay to be successful. Look at these two, that some of the most successful women in New Zealand. And I even feel you guys don't sit in that, or necessarily, there is a bit of humility there. And maybe it's required because you're that successful, but maybe I'm just not quite there yet. And I need to fake it till I make it a little bit more. But that's an experience and a journey that I'm really on right now. And so, I'm super passionate about just trying to actually lean into talking about what I'm doing and being confident about the journey that I'm on. And there's room for everyone in this room to be successful, to do amazing things, and no one loses out by all of us succeeding. So I think that tall poppy thing is alive and real, and I want to quash it, something terrible.
Absolutely.
Well, this is nerve-wracking, but I'm going to say it anyway because I hate public speaking.
Good on you then.
But I have a daughter with no brothers, and she would always say, "Oh, sweetheart, you look amazing." She'd always be like, "I know, mommy," or "You're so kind and clever." "I know, mommy." But she also has this thing where she's very self-aware, and she's like, "I'm shit at that, mommy. I'm not actually good at that." I'm like, "It's okay, sweetheart. You need to practice."
Whereas men don't have that. Yeah. No, I'm kidding.
It's totally okay to be like, I'm good at this, and be self-aware.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a mature kind of settling of what I said there, which is true. Like, you have to be self-aware and, like, don't, obviously don't say you're good at things when you're not. But I just think we do have a tendency as women to underplay things. I feel deeply uncomfortable asking for money or telling people that I founded a business. Like, someone asked me here tonight, "Oh, what's your role here?" And I was like, "Yeah, founded Slice." Like, awkward. It's not that awkward. Like,
I think it's about your comfort zones, though. It depends on your comfort zones. And, if you're doing something that you haven't done before, it doesn't matter what it is, you're going outside your comfort zone. And so if you're wanting to have more and do more in your success, whether it's in property or in wealth, then you're going to have to get uncomfortable. You're going to have to do more and actually put yourself in uncomfortable positions, because it depends. Wealth is about being above average, isn't it? Because everybody can't be there. And some people are very happy to be like that. I was quite lucky with my parents. They said, do anything that you want. If you want to ride your bicycle and be a postman and ride in the sunshine, then do that. If you want to be an astronaut and go to the moon and that's what you want to do that, but do what you love. And I think that's really important, because we only have one go at this. And so actually find something that you love, and then you can put yourself in uncomfortable positions because you want it more, whatever it is. And, then you actually don't care. I remember sitting, and it's interesting because quite often females are the most judgmental of women. I remember many times I've been judged. I'll give you a couple of examples. I hardly ever do these with only women, because for success, it's actually not just women. I had my amazing husband who, I'm gallivanting around the world. And I was sharing my story of global growth of taking tech around the world to India and winning tech scale-up of the year in India against like 12,000 fintechs globally. And I shared the story, and the first question from the floor was, don't you feel guilty when you're swimming, running around the world and your kids are at home by themselves? And I'm like, would you ask Rod Drury that question? Because they went home alone by themselves. Actually, my wonderful husband gave up his career so I could take the risk to get on a plane. And we have relatively high market penetration here, and there's this many properties. And in India, unfortunately, it's 25 hours away, but there's this many properties. And so to grow and scale and be all I can be, I have to get on an airplane and I have to lead them, and they understand why I'm doing that. And they get the benefits of doing that mummy's doing all that she can and I'm living my best life, and they're empowering me and excited that I'm doing that. And so we often judge each other like, what a question to ask me. Or when I'm sitting in assembly and I've gone early for the prize giving because they don't let you book a seat, and I'm sitting in the front row, but I'm working on a pitch, so I'm actually sitting there for 45 minutes to wait for it to start so I can be in the front row. But I'm on my laptop because I have a deadline and I'm not going to get this 45 minutes back, and everyone's looking at me. She's on a laptop. She's at a prize-giving assembly. It hasn't started yet, darlings. I'm just I have a deadline. It's a multi-million-dollar deal, and I could either go and sit at the back and not let my darling see me, or, come late and stand, or not be here and be working on the pitch. How do I make those choices? You are going to have to make...
I think they just wanted you to twiddle your thumbs. It's
to sit there on my phone for 45 minutes. But you are going to have to make sacrifices, and it might not be for everybody, and people will judge you, and you just got to decide, well, actually, I don't mind that you think I'm funny that I'm sitting here on my laptop because I know what I'm doing. And, I don't mind that you're in your exercise gear. I don't mind that you turn up 6 o'clock to a horse pony club, and I've turned up like this because I've been running across the meetings all day, not such a bright dress. I work in mostly banking, so it's a bit more sedate than this. But, and all the mothers are in their horse riding gear, and they're all looking at me going, oh, look what she's wearing. And well, I'm not going, well, why are you in your horse riding gear? Are you going to jump on the pony? I know you have a horse too, and you're a horse mum, but, I've also got horse riding gear, but I'm not wearing it to watch my daughter ride. And they're just judging, and I can see them judging, but I don't mind. So I think, doesn't matter really, does it?
Just judge them back harder. You're not even on a horse, hun.
Why do pony mums wear pony clothes and horse riding pants? Like, everybody's got their horse riding pants on. Like, are you going to jump on and let me do a demo?
Do a demo?
No, it's clearly
it's an issue. No, darling, it's all right, darling. But I get it, because one of the things you talked about, your very supportive partner, and I have one as well, right? And so one of the biggest choices you will make in life will be who you decide to partner in life with. Okay, so I'm just saying now that choose wisely.
We're not for everyone.
Yeah. And because my husband, poor husband, thought he was marrying this nice, quiet little Chinese girl, right? Because he's Dutch, European, Kiwi Dutch, I'm Kiwi Asian, Chinese, clearly. And when he met me, I was quite quiet. I just really was, and he was the entrepreneur, and he took all the risks, and he was doing all this cool stuff, and I was kind of faffing around, not really knowing what I was going to do. And then I finally found a career in recruitment, and that's when the earning was same thing, low salary, huge commission, really good at it, made lots of money, right? So that's kind of
likes those things.
Yeah,
work
likes
hard,
my things,
buy things.
As I said, good earner and good spender, So I think the thing is, he then had to make a shift. He had to change roles. We've only got one child, so, much easier for him. But having said that, I could never have left the home not knowing that somebody I trusted was at home with her. And so, I could not have done what we did in the business without him, because I would have just been. So one of the other things to think about, other than, your property journey and all this thing, is who you choose to be your life partner. And, one of the things that I used to say to my lovely female staff, and they used to look at me like I was mad, because they were all young and, in their prime dating years. And I'd say one of the big attractive things about your partner is reliability. Are they there when you need them? Are they your biggest cheerleader? Are they in your corner no matter what, right? And that's, the lovely good looks and the hair and all that might go, eventually, you know, for men, I'm talking about. But, you know,
Not for us.
not for us, potentially. But you know what I mean? Like, you just got to think about the long term for yourself and what really matters in the end, you know. I mean, obviously, you've got to have fun and all that stuff as well.
I think that's such an important point because you go through different phases, and my surname is Croatian, obviously, and when my husband's parents have heard that he's going to stay and look after the kids and I'm going to carry on working because I'm in data and tech and I can't stop and I make great money and I love what I do, and they were like, you mean you what? You know, the paradigm is so interesting because even school for so many years, he would say, well, I ring my number first, not my wife's, and I'll be in Melbourne or somewhere, you know, for work, and my phone rings, school rings, and the phone rings and school rings, your heart goes, and they're ringing me first. I'm like, oh, have you tried my husband? They're like, no. They're ringing the mother. And no matter how many times we say that, well, actually, we put his phone number first because actually I'm generally in meetings and he's not. So it's about set your own paradigm, what's right. And that doesn't mean it's what everybody wants to do. But
Oh, it's also really equally valid if you choose to opt out of the children thing.
Yes,
Honestly.
exactly.
Oh my God, people who, I've had so many young women come out and other women who have said, I'm so sick and tired of going to women's events and they're talking about the struggle of the juggle. I don't want to have kids. And I go, you know what, that's completely valid. But it's really interesting though because a lot of the women conversations and employee conversations is around balance. And there are some women that feel quite disadvantaged and put upon and even somehow feel quite as though we carry the burden because the mums get the preferential treatment, right? I don't know if anyone has experienced that. I didn't have that worry because by that stage, by the time I had my daughter, I had my own company with my business partner. So I don't know what that's like for women who maybe are working with working mums, and companies are doing different things for mums versus, you know, people who don't have that responsibility. So there is even within the sisterhood, right, there is that disparity. So we've just got to be mindful as well that all the woman conversations aren't just centred around the whole mum conversation because it's not the only conversation. So I'm just conscious of that.
Equally, you can be a stay-at-home mum too, obviously, if that's what you want. Like, I think it goes back to what Carmen was saying earlier.
What's
Your value? What's your paradigm? What do you
Absolutely.
want? And then work from there. Obviously, we're just sharing more about what that looks like when you do want to be more invested and you like the hustle. Like, that has been a really interesting one with my partner. So I think I've got a goodie. I'll let you know. We've got a contracting out agreement for now, so it's all going well. But we do have that discussion, and he's more than happy to be a stay-at-home father if and when we get to that point. So I think it's important to, have those conversations with your potential partner, though. What are they looking for? What are you looking for? First, work it out yourself. Then kind of, work it out
and I
with
think,
them.
make sure, I'm cognizant, and you're right, there's sort of those multiple things, but I'm cognizant of the ones that are doing the juggle, that they obviously really do care about their career. That's why they're doing the juggle. That's why they're there, because they're making that sacrifice, because that's what I did. And then is the sacrifice worth it? Because when I was working for somebody else, I made some decisions that, in hindsight, I gave them, blood, sweat and tears and was literally on the laptop with the baby on my boob because I could. And, actually, I should have not worked so hard because they didn't value me, because look how they treated me when I left to go and set my own company. And so I think it's thinking about, what are the sacrifices that you are prepared to make and what are they not? I'll give one last example. When they were doing a trip and they said I had to come, and I was feeding still, and it was an overnight trip, and I said, well, then you're going to have to bring my husband and the baby because I'm feeding. And they said, well, no one else's partners are coming. This is quite a few years ago now. And I said, well, then I'm not coming because I'm feeding my baby. That was what I wanted to do. So I don't have to travel. And so really just being quite firm about your values and what you do and you don't want to do. And so I did get to have my cake and eat it too. They did actually pay for him to come and the baby, and they had the two choices. I don't have to do that. So, just always difficult to manage if you're sitting there thinking, oh my God, imagine being her boss. And that's why I'm an entrepreneur and started my own companies. But, you might not do that from day one. You might have the corporate experience first, and everybody's got a unique path. But, I think today we were talking also about the property path. Certainly, undoubtedly, getting into the market if you can, whether it's with your parents, making the right decisions and doing the right due diligence around that, because it's often your most valuable investment. And, you would go and get an AA test when you're buying a car. Make sure you don't rush into it. And there's this little bit of, when I look back retrospectively, of, make it happen and stretch. And also, if it's not meant to be, it's not going to happen. And I remember missing out on properties thinking, oh my God, it was the end of the world. And I'd done my whole Pinterest board, and then it wasn't meant to be, actually. Going, what do you mean? Like, I did all the laws of attraction. I wrote it on my mirror, and I didn't. But actually, then something better always came along. So, it's like finding that balance, but make sure you do the right due diligence.
Yeah, when
Be
you're
really clear.
When you're both looking at property, what are some sort of tips or things that you give to others considering?
I just had a friend.
You're obviously saying the valuation.
The valuation, yeah. I just had a friend who did exactly that. She went and got a building report on a house she really wanted to buy, and it was she just loved it. It had all the things, and building report came back. So potentially it's not watertight. It's got a cladding. The decking is not structurally sound. The retaining wall's not right. So and she was heartbroken, but I think it would have been very easy for her because she was buying it emotionally. It was an emotional decision for her to have not got that building report because she'd already made the offer, but she was smart enough to wait for the building report to come back. And it was contingent. The offer was contingent on the report coming back sound. So now, where's she at? So two options: basically walk away, or get a cost for how much that all the remedy is going to be, and take it off the price. If you can.
Yeah, you've got to ask the experts.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, for most of us, our most valuable asset. Yeah. And you will get emotive about it. But, there's lots of things to look at. Obviously, I am going to say get a valuation, but it's also things like leasehold, Maori land, Section 36, Section 72 that the valuer should pick up. So getting a valuation. So depending on your deposit, most banks are going to want a valuation, and that's what Velocity does. We digitise the credit policy for the bank, and then they either lend on an automated valuation model, a desk valuation, or they send a valuer, and we do that whole process. But the valuers really, and that's an independent process, just because the real estate agent and the valuer and the broker shouldn't be allowed to collude on what that valuation amount is. And that's why we created our platform, to make that all independent, and so that's not possible. And, it's very, very powerful to get independent information and then look at the market around you. And there's also lots of information out there. So on One Roof, you can look and see the estimate ranges. Often I won't volunteer where I work, and I'll be looking at properties, and a real estate agent will be saying something, and I'll be going, and we got a really good bargain. When we were buying our second property, the real estate agent at the time, I said, what's the capital value? And she's like, well, they want the capital value. But the capital value means nothing compared to the value of the property. Yeah. And it was 3 years old. And it gets updated every 3 years, and it was nearing getting updated. So we gave them an offer of the capital value. They accepted it, and then it got updated, and I got instant equity in my property. Like, what a crazy thing to align the value of a property and what they're asking for based on the capital value. And they just didn't want to pay for an automated valuation model or a valuation. So whether you're selling a property, you should get an independent valuation. Say, what should I be asking? The real estate agent is great, but obviously not a valuer. A valuer has to he's liable to get it right. And make sure that when you're buying a property that you get a valuation, and it's an independent one. The valuer shouldn't have worked with the vendor, and it needs to be independent and agnostic so that you are getting the right information.
Yeah, and that's how sometimes people bid as well without even having seen the range. They might use homes.co.nz or something, and it could be 500k above the actual value or below or whatever. So you actually...
I would note no bank lends on homes.co. So
no, yeah, exactly. The banks are all using Velocity, but sometimes customers go without, like they go and bid and they don't give the property that they're going to bid on to the bank. So you get people that haven't actually gone, oh, hey, ANZ, I'm looking at this property here, can I go and bid on it? And they just instead, they go and bid on it, and they bid 300k more than the valuation range. And then the bank goes, we're not going to lend on that. You're going to have to find second tier lending to get on top of the loan amount that we're going to give you for that property. So you can put yourself in a really bad position.
Situation.
If you're not careful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How has property enabled your business, and also what tips do you have in the general kind of business space for the audience today?
So because of my husband's lovely saving, having that house enabled me to go out, because by the time we started Madison with my business partner, our house was mortgage free. So we had the ability and no debt to be able to take a risk. And that meant that I could go out into business and think, well, what's the worst that could happen, right? If it doesn't succeed, then I'll just go get another job, right? So we were fortunate that the earning ability that I have had paid down all our debt, and that it allowed me to start Madison. And one of the things about having business is that it will be the thing that will give you your if it's successful, it will give you your greatest return on dollar invested it will outperform property by a country mile if your business grows and it does what it should do if it's a good business and a sustainable business. So I'm talking about successful businesses, business that scale and grow. We're not talking sort of corner shop businesses. I'm not talking about small mom and pop type stores or anything like that. I'm just talking about building value into a business and growing something substantial. If I told you we started Madison with something like, it might have been 10 grand, 20 grand. We had a lovely landlord that let us be flexible with our office rent. So it wasn't a lot of money to start off with. And when I think about the return over the years and the exit price, how could I have made that money from, 10, 50, 100 grand over 10, 15 years? It just would not have been possible. So I'm just saying that allowed us to do that. And subsequent to that, I've also bought an industrial property. So I didn't want to have all residential. So the thing about residential property, a lot of people say, well, what if I can't afford my property? What I'll do is buy a rental outside of Auckland and rent it, and then maybe get on the property ladder that way, which is a strategy.
That's what I did, actually.
Yeah, exactly. The issue with that is to understand the difference between your responsibilities as a residential landlord versus a commercial and industrial landlord. I mean, the residential landlord thing, and this is where I don't think tenants understand the huge impact on landlords. They pay a lot of they pay the rates, they have to pay for the water, wastewater things, insurance, all of the things, and make sure that the place is tenantable and livable and they should, right? Those things are absolutely they should. Commercial and industrial, the tenant pays all of that. So that's why we switched and we went into industrial and commercial. So just be aware that if you are looking at doing investment in the residential space, that you actually understand the cost. It's, where you get rent and you think, oh, that'll pay the mortgage. That's not enough. There's a lot more than the mortgage that you have to think about. So just being clear on that side of things. But anyway, that enabled me to get into industrial commercial property, which is much more attractive actually in terms of the cost of the mortgages and getting that back. I think property also enabled me we've got a property portfolio. We bought Smart years ago. We bought a really prime piece of land, which we've kind of sat on. We did a rental. They had a rental on it. But now we're looking at doing a development potentially. So, and we're learning about that. And one of the things I would say is, as to Carmen's point about really understanding risk in that sense, because we're not property developers, I've never done a property development, we've been really getting a lot of advice from experts because we've heard of people who've come quite unstuck, put a lot of money into development, didn't know what they were doing and lost their shirts. So we are not going to be one of those, hopefully, touch wood. And that's really properties elevating us again still, but we're leveraging what we have and hopefully smart ways.
So it's a growth journey really from that first kind of stepping stone.
Yeah. And I think, it's actually seeing how do you get into the property. As I say, we bought a terrace house. It was 70 square metres. It was definitely by no means our dream house. It was on Panmure Basin. I had never lived in Panmure, but that's where we saw this billboard. My parents saw the billboard, and the next thing we bought a terrace house. And when we bought our next property, we rented out the terrace house, and it was absolutely immaculate. It was brand new. It was our first ever thing that we owned. And the tenant had a child who drew on the walls, messed stuff, stopped paying her rent. And I went there and saw she'd half moved out. She wasn't replying to my calls. And I said, well, I'm going to change the locks if she doesn't pay me, because she owes me 3 months and she kept on not responding to me. And I was, young and didn't have money to cover her rent. And then she basically threatened me that she was going to call and say I'd locked her out and she couldn't feed her children. And I was this rich landlord, which was nothing of the sort. I had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and we're on one income. And, that was too much risk for where I was at that stage, and so we sold it happily because I thought I just don't need this in my life to be cleaning up after somebody that's not going to respect my property. But there's many successful people that have rental investments, and it doesn't mean that it's not for you. It just means what is your career path and your wealth path, because certainly one of my companies started with 10 grand because I have to pay developers and data scientists, and they're all a lot more expensive. And then for us, they had to buy all the data, which is hundreds of thousands of dollars. And, it was a really high barrier to entry. That's why there wasn't anyone doing what I'm doing. And the same as we go into new markets. So it really depends on your personal journey and what you're wanting to do. I think when you look at getting into the property market, there's things that you can do that can get you into it that might not give you your most perfect thing. And I think compromise is really important, to recognize. For example, you can go into the next school zone, and it probably doesn't matter if you don't have any kids, and it'll be that much cheaper and you'll pay it off much faster. So we wanted some land for our kids, and we bought in Waimaoku. Did I have to sit in traffic to come into town every day? Of course I did. But I had a bigger house with 4 children that I could afford. So recognize there's going to be sacrifices and compromises that you need to make. What's most important to you? Because, I think lots of young people, are in Ponsonby flatting and walk to dinner and think, well, that's what it's going to be. And then, oh, gosh, I can't buy in Ponsonby. Well, didn't. I couldn't buy in Ponsonby either. So, thinking about, well, everybody wants to get in the property ladder, but, setting your expectations. And we did a lot of first-home buyer events with banks where we're going, I know you think you want to live in Ellerslie because mum and dad are in Remuera, but, you're more like Onehunga, and actually keep going a little bit further. You're a little bit further, but you're getting there. So you can come in
all the way to Bragglin.
Yeah. Well, I was by Waimaoku. And I remember my kids going, why do we live so far? And, we've now moved to Coatesville, and they're like, oh my God, we've got Uber Eats. They're like going nuts on Uber Eats because there was no Uber even in Waimaoku. Recognise where you are and be realistic.
And see it as an investment as well, because again,
yeah.
that's like, it's an emotional experience, and you want to buy a home and you want all of that. But also, how good is finery? But also, you have to think of it as a financial journey, as an opportunity for you to grow your wealth. Property is one of the biggest ways you can do that. You can put money into stock, but what money? Like if you don't have $800K, because we'll put it into a property perspective, if you don't have $800,000 to put into stock and to invest in shares, then you don't have $800,000 to put into shares. And the bank's not going to lend you $800,000 to put it into shares, but they are going to lend you $800,000 to put into property, and you're going to get returns on that. So that's one of the biggest reasons why property is such a powerful
It's hard to get
opportunity.
away from.
Oh,
It's really hard to get away
is.
from. And that's the other thing about property is that you can use it to start businesses.
Yeah,
Leverage.
that's the next point that I wanted to get to.
It's your leverage.
Yeah, it's your
100%.
leverage. And that's what happened for me. I mean, literally, if we hadn't had the security of a paid down house, we'd never have potentially maybe I would never have taken that risk, to go and start something.
It's hard to get the money though. The banks won't lend you money for a business in New Zealand, but they'll lend you money for a house, and then they'll lend you money for your business against that house.
100%.
Yes. Before you go into anything, so there have been some horror stories around buying off plans. You'll have heard some of that. So just be like everything I say to people, it's really easy to get into something. It's harder to get out. So the questions you would always ask is, how do I get out? So if you buy off the plans and they don't meet to the deadline, or they don't, because we've had stories where people bought off the plans and then the thing that they've bought is actually decreased in value and it hasn't even been finished. And they've got finance against that amount. Okay, so, and they've got, debt to that and mortgages to that amount, and yet the thing is worth less than what they paid for it. So
I think that's really current in this current market.
And they can't get out of the contract because the contracts allow the developers to keep sunsetting, to keep going,
They're massively in favour of the developer.
They really are.
Yeah.
And I think that, there's a massive risk that's in the current market where building costs have increased. And, we've seen it really badly in other markets. When I first went to India, I was like, well, how come there's so many, everywhere you look, there's all these empty, half-finished buildings. And yet there's like a, housing shortage. Everybody everybody's trying to buy a house. I don't understand. And what had happened is the developer had bought this land and pre-sold some off the plans.
Yep.
And then he took that money to go and buy the land over there and he started pre-selling. And then he went and bought some other land and started pre-selling. And what happened is the prices went up and the whole thing tippled like a domino. And so today there's tens of thousands of properties, and it's actually a government initiative that we're working on where people have got their life savings in these properties and they can't get them out because of the wrong contracts. And so it's incredibly sad. But Modi's government and Amitabh Khan's is working with us on Housing for All to see how do we've now actually built, it's called Build IQ, a module so that actually the banks release the funding to the developers as it's being developed. And they also can see the concentration risk of a developer to see actually how exposed that developer is, because we've built this very complicated module for them to track it for this very reason. And we don't have this in New Zealand. We're very lucky. I think our banks are very, very best practice. But if you're buying off the plans, like we had a very successful story, you know, my brother-in-law's sister, she bought some and they were the Sacramento ones. They were leaky. She was stuck with a leaky and was her first one, and it could have been us. And so you do have to make sure you ask the right advice, and you don't want to spend money with a lawyer, but ask the right people for advice.
Look at their track
The lawyers
record.
are those people that can give you that advice.
Yes.
So like,
Yeah.
and
That's
that's
what I'm
what,
saying, you need to, in
that's
this instance, you
just don't want to not pay for that support and then find that instead of spending $2,000, you're now down the whole $200K.
100%.
And that's also our Slice platform where we have lawyers for fixed fees. So thanks so much, Carmen. You're doing a great job here today.
Well, please, Carmen.
But we negotiate fixed fees with our lawyers.
Good.
And those lawyers
been
support
recorded.
with absolutely, they support with absolutely every part of that journey so that you do avoid those risks, I guess.
Yeah.
There's good risks and there's bad
Yeah.
risks, and that's a bad risk. So I guess that's what it comes down to. Just to kind of wrap things up, because I'm conscious we've been talking all too easily, what do you think has been one of your biggest personal challenges? I'm kind of just asking this because I want to know. From a mindset perspective, like any blocker that you've felt or a barrier that you feel has been an issue that's yours and yours alone to solve, and how have you solved that or worked through it?
Probably one of the hardest challenges was when I decided I was going to start this company, and, you know, I had this lovely idea and business case and, you know, thought it was all going to be easy, and then I couldn't even start. And I was being offered jobs at corporates, which would have obviously been a lot safer, and I was putting at risk our house money. And I had 4 children, and we had a mortgage. So the land was mortgaged, and we had, you know, sold our house to build on this land. So I was taking high stakes, and I was obviously upset that I couldn't start right away, and I had to fight sort of, you know, a bit of legal stuff that wasn't right. And I just remember thinking, you know, well, why shouldn't I? But also, I have 2 choices. I can be a victim and go, poor me, this isn't fair, because it wasn't. Why shouldn't I be allowed to start my own company? Or I could actually just decide this is not how the story ends. And today I, you know, have 90% of market share in New Zealand with working with lenders, and I'm, you know, winner of fintech in India, and it's because there's going to be barriers. When I went to Australia, we tried to buy the data, and they're like, no, there's only 2 resellers, and they're both my competitors. And again, I could have gone, well, that's just too hard. No wonder there's only 2. And then we said, well, we just want to pay the same money. And they said, well, no. And we said, well, actually, you know, you're stopping innovation. And I had to fight and go to the top and get them to sell me the data. And there's been so many examples of that. I mean, India, there is no data, and there's more challenges there. So I guess, you know, you can see the tip of the iceberg when you see what success looks like. But for every win, we've had to battle. We've had to punch through brick walls to get there. There's so many times when you could have given up, because this is what success is like. It's not a straight line. It's a roller coaster ride. And so you just have to decide, well, actually, you know, is this how the story ends? Or actually, no, this is not how the story ends. I'm going to actually not accept that answer. And it's amazing what happens when you have that mindset. Mindset is everything. If you think you can, you can. And if you think you can't, you can't. Either way, you're right. And so set your paradigms and write your goals down. I have mine written on my mirror with a whiteboard chalk marker. I think my cleaner thinks I'm mad, like looks like hieroglyphics by the end of the year. And then I wash it out. But so many of my goals that I've written down over the years actually come to fruition.
So mine's about money. So it's really interesting. I guess for me, culturally, and my parents were poor when they arrived here. So, you know, but we never went for any, you know, we didn't want for anything.
From
we had
state housing to commercial property investor.
You know, they set the example for me in terms of saving hard. They don't buy luxury things. You know, they don't. They're actually very successful in their own right. They're very, financially well off. They own a lot of property. Actually, if talking about a property journey, they own a lot of property, commercial, residential, right across, and they have a passive income now that allows them to, whatever. But they are so careful. And so a lot of my mindset about money, even though, I have people say things to me like, oh my God, you can afford it. Or, you've got so much money, that's a drop in the ocean, and it's really difficult for me to remember that because I actually didn't come from that. And so I think that money mindset is really baked in from your childhood experiences and what you saw role modelled for you, right? I mean, my mother still has stuff for good. And I'm saying to her, use it, and I don't do that. So the one thing I have learned is I don't do that now. I don't say things for good. And one of the other things I had, I invested in a wardrobe consultant for a little while, and she was lovely, and she was just really down to earth, not one of those people that expected, but she had worked for Gucci, she had worked for Adrian Winkleman, she had worked for... Anyway, she said, it's really interesting, you have a psychology around money that you find it really difficult to spend money on yourself, and you justify it a lot. And I thought that was such an insight about how I treated money that I would buy things and I would like them, but then I would feel this overwhelming guilt that I'd spent so much money on that particular item, even though I could afford it and wanted it. I had to keep justifying because then I would say to her, oh, that was on sale. And usually it was, or, I bought that, when I was overseas and, there was, and I was always justifying. And it's really interesting how I've had to overcome that part of my upbringing. But I will never be profligate. And I mean, I will never just be thoughtless spending on stuff that actually, I don't own. I have a car that's 10 years old. It's a perfectly sound Audi. I really like it. I liked it when I bought it. I still like it. I'm not trading in for a, brand new car every year. I'm not going to buy that. So I really find it difficult to be buying those luxury items. And that's a mindset that's really difficult. The flip side of that, though, is I might buy a whole lot of stuff I shouldn't buy, which is less expensive, and I should have just bought the one good thing instead of the 10 crappy things.
See, I'm the opposite, yeah. But actually, it's interesting that you say that, that your parents came, and my parents came from South Africa, and at the time we could only bring out 100,000 Rand, which equated to about 25,000 New Zealand dollars. And so we went from a beautiful house with help and a swimming pool to coming here to safety. But my parents, they had 2 jobs, and we did cleaning, and at that time there was smoking, so we used to clean the banks and empty the ashtrays and empty the rubbish bins after school, and my parents had 2 jobs. So we also did the same thing, which is really interesting because people assume because, you're wealthy today that you must have been born into it. But, they also taught us the power of hard work. But I think setting yourself goals, because I'm slightly different. Like I would go and fly to Australia to pitch my first bank in Australia after we were successful here. And I'd always work through duty free. And there's this beautiful red Schaefer pen with a pearl on the top, the Marilyn Monroe one. And I would look at it and I set myself the goal, when I get my first client and they pay me in Australia, I'm going to buy the pen. And so things, it might be a big thing or a little thing, but actually setting yourself a goal and celebrating the success along the way is how I'm driven. So that's how I'm personally driven. And also for my family, so they can say, well, we're doing this and then we're going to be doing this, and that's why I'm working really hard and, I'm going to be a bit late and doing all these things. But actually they also learn not to be entitled and the power of hard work, which is also really important. But I think goal setting is a powerful driver, whatever that goal is.
That's super interesting because I had a little mentee bee this week. And my mindset blocker, which is sort of why I wanted to finish on this topic. And we're going to do an exercise as a group afterwards and just talk a little bit about your money mindsets. We'll get you kind of mingling together and we'll see how that goes. But I had a little cry because I'm moving into the sales side of my business. And I'm so used to being comfortable and comfortable being uncomfortable, but not necessarily finding it too hard to pick things up. Like now we're in marketing, we're doing brand and cool, like I'm learning how to do that, enjoy it. Then I've moved into the sales thing, and for whatever reason, I love the meetings, I love talking to people, I love talking about the vision, the platform, but the cold calls, so hard.
But if you are selling something that you're passionate about, it's a mindset because you're not selling. if you are solving someone's problem, and you've solved everyone's problem tonight so many times because I didn't look and see that she's got these things to sell and I'm saying you need them. So your mindset just has to shift that actually what I'm building the world needs. And you're lucky I'm calling you because I am here to help you.
I'm not selling. You're
not
buying.
Selling. Yeah. That's it. You're not selling. Like you
But
either,
it is. It's been massive.
No, you're not selling. You just lose the word. You're not selling.
Yeah.
You're solving their problems.
But it's been massive. Like that's
Lucky
just been
them.
that has been a challenge I've literally had this week, and that I've been listening to you two talking about, you know, your mindset around it, and the goal thing that you said there as well is also super interesting because I've now created a point system where I make so many calls, I get X reward. I'm like manicure 150 points, massage 300 points. Each call is with a point, and then if I get to 600 points, trip away. And I wrote them all down, and I'm asking my partner to keep me accountable, and he's like, wait, am I paying for all of these? And I was like, no. I mean, that would be like if you want to, but no, it's more of actually just, did you do it? Did you earn the points? Now you get the reward. So I'm very reward focused as well. So maybe, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this activity afterwards, but maybe it is working out what you're motivated by when you're coming up against a mindset block. How can you shift that? How can you move it? And what's the antidote? Because honestly, I was just so frustrated at myself and annoyed and lost in the moment. And now I'm starting to see with some clarity in this conversation.
But I think, you know, whether it's pie or whatever it is, you're all selling. You're selling yourself.
But they're
how
buying.
you're talking. Well, yeah, exactly. But everybody, each one of you needs to recognise when you're going for a job interview, guess what? You know, you're selling yourself. When you're, going out on that date, you're selling yourself. Most people are uncomfortable.
You know what? It mirrors
selling.
that humility thing, because selling is like the antithesis of humility. Thank you for joining our community. Buying property isn't easy, but listening in will get you one step closer on your journey. Please leave an Apple or Spotify review and provide feedback so we can improve your experience. Join our Facebook group, A Safe Space to Learn Together, or follow us on Instagram at Slice2Buy. If you have any questions or topics you would like us to touch on, you can email us at hello@slice2buy.com. A quick reminder, Slice the podcast does not provide personalised investment advice. We are not acting as financial advisors or taking into account your circumstances. To get personalised advice, join us at slice2buy.com and engage with our partners who can act as your financial advisor or lawyer and support you with your specific needs.